My brother-in-law stood up at my father's funeral reception, climbed onto a chair in front of everyone, and announced that his wife, my adopted sister, was getting the entire $10 million inheritance because she's the oldest daughter. That's tradition, and my father's lawyer, he just smiled. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type "interested" in the comments. And I will give you a heart. I'm standing at my father's funeral reception in the community center we'd rented in Portland, Oregon, and the room smells like lilies and grief, and that specific kind of sadness that hangs in air when good man dies, and everyone's wearing black. Everyone's holding paper plates with food they're not eating. Everyone's speaking in those hushed funeral voices like speaking normally would wake the dead. And my husband Marcus is standing beside me with his hand on my lower back, that protective touch that says "I'm here, I've got you." And my sister Emily is across the room with her husband Derek, and Derek, my brother-in-law who I've known for 8 years, who seemed nice enough at holidays, who always asked Dad about his portfolio in that casual way that never felt casual. Derek suddenly stands up, actually climbs onto a chair like he's about to give toast, and the room goes quiet, goes completely silent in that way that happens when someone does something so inappropriate, so shocking, that everyone's brain needs a second to process what they're seeing. And Derek clears his throat, adjusts his tie, looks around room like he's about to deliver good news, and he says, loud enough for everyone to hear, loud enough that conversations stop, that forks pause halfway to mouths, that my Aunt Patricia actually drops her plate. He says, everyone listen up. Dad always believed in tradition, always believed in doing things the right way, and in this family, in families like ours, the oldest daughter gets the bulk of the estate. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. And Emily, she's the oldest, so the 10 million, the stocks, the accounts, all of it, it's hers, it's ours, fair and square. And I feel Marcus's hand tighten on my back, feel my own breath stop, feel my face go hot and then cold, because did Derek just announce at my father's funeral, at the reception where we're supposed to be mourning, where we're supposed to be remembering Dad? Did he just declare that he and Emily are getting everything? And I look at Emily, my sister, the girl who came into our family when she was 6 months old, who I helped teach to read, who I defended from bullies in middle school, who I stood beside at her wedding to this man. And she's looking at floor, her face is red, her hands are twisted together, and she won't meet my eyes, won't look at me, and that's when I understand that this wasn't spontaneous. Wasn't Derek going rogue? This was planned, was discussed, was something they decided together. And Derek is still standing on that chair, still looking around like he expects applause, like he expects everyone to nod and say yes. That makes sense. Tradition, oldest daughter, of course, except nobody's nodding, everyone's staring, and my father's lawyer, Mr. Harrison, this quiet man in his 60s who's been handling Dad's affairs for 20 years, who's sitting in corner with folder on his lap, he raises one eyebrow, just slightly, and I swear I see corner of his mouth twitch. Not a smile exactly, more like recognition, like he's been waiting for this moment, like he knows something Derek doesn't. And Marcus whispers in my ear, his voice tight with anger. Did that just happen? Did he actually just do that? And I can't speak, can't form words, because my throat is closed, because tears are threatening, not sad tears, humiliated tears, angry tears, tears that come when someone you trusted, someone you called family, reveals exactly what they think you're worth. And Derek finally steps down from chair, brushes off his pants like he's accomplished something, like he's taken care of business, and he walks over to Emily, puts his arm around her shoulders, and she leans into him, still not looking at me. And I think about last 2 years, think about pattern I'd been seeing but refusing to name, and it all makes sense now. All clicks into place with horrible clarity that makes me want to scream, want to throw something, want to demand explanation, except we're at funeral. We're surrounded by Dad's friends, by family, by people who are watching this unfold with expressions ranging from shock to disgust to that particular kind of fascination people have when they're witnessing drama that isn't theirs. And I realize that Derek has just made spectacle of my father's death, has turned memorial into negotiation, has transformed grief into greed. And worst part, absolute worst part, is that he thinks he's won, thinks he's secured fortune, thinks he's outmaneuvered everyone, except he doesn't know what I know, doesn't know what Dad told me 3 months ago when diagnosis came back terminal, when doctors said 6 months maybe, when Dad called me to house alone and said, I need to tell you something important, and I'd sat across from him in living room where I'd grown up, where he taught me to play chess, where we'd had 1,000 conversations about everything and nothing, and He'd looked at me with those clear blue eyes that were starting to cloud with medication, with pain, with approaching death, and he'd said your sister's changed, or maybe she hasn't changed. Maybe I just finally see her clearly, and I'd known what he meant without him elaborating, had seen it too, the way Emily had started visiting more after diagnosis, the way Derek's questions about his state had become more frequent, more direct, more demanding, the way they'd started talking about fairness, about tradition, about what oldest daughter deserves, and Dad had smiled, that sad knowing smile, and he'd said, "Don't worry, I've taken care of it, the will is clear, and when time comes, when someone inevitably makes scene, probably Derek, because that boy has always been transparent about what he values. Just remember that I saw it coming, I planned for it, and justice, real justice, it's patient." And I'd asked, "What do you mean? What did you do?" And he'd said, "You'll see, you'll all see, and it'll be perfect. Trust me," and I trusted him, had pushed worry aside, had focused on being present, on bringing soup, on sitting beside his bed during chemo, on reading to him when he was too tired to hold book, on being daughter, not heir, just daughter who loved her father and wanted him comfortable, wanted him happy, wanted him to know he was loved right up until end, and Marcus had been there too, had taken time off work, had helped with medications, had sat with me during long nights. When Dad's breathing was labored, when pain was bad, when morphine made him confused, and Emily had visited, had brought flowers, had stayed for hour, maybe two, and Derek had come, had asked questions, had looked through papers when he thought nobody was watching, had made comments about market timing, about estate taxes, about importance of clear succession, and now standing at reception with Derek's declaration still hanging in air, with Emily's refusal to meet my eyes, with room full of people watching, waiting, wondering what happens next, I understand what Dad meant. Understand why Mr. Harrison is sitting there with that knowing expression. Understand that the folder on his lap contains something, some revelation, some truth that Derek hasn't anticipated. And I want it read now, want it open now, want everyone to hear what Dad actually wrote, what he actually intended. But Mr. Harrison is waiting, is letting moments stretch, is giving Derek enough rope. And Marcus whispers, "Should we say something? Should we stop this?" And I shake my head because Dad said, "Trust him," because Dad said it would be perfect, because Dad knew Derek better than Derek knew himself, knew that greed always overplays its hand, always announces itself too loudly, always assumes victory before game is finished. And I'm watching Derek, watching him accept condolences from Aunt, watching him nod seriously like he's already patriarch, already man in charge, already person who controls fortune. And I feel rage building, feel it rising from stomach to chest to throat, feel it mixing with grief, with loss, with betrayal, because Emily was my sister, was person I shared childhood with, was person I defended, was person I loved, and she's let her husband, she's let her marriage, she's let greed transform her into someone who won't even look at me at our father's funeral. And that transformation, that choice, it hurts worse than Derek's announcement, worse than assumption that I don't matter. Worse than anything except Dad being gone, and Dad is gone. Dad died 3 days ago in hospice with me and Marcus beside him, with Emily nowhere, with Derek calling later saying they'd been stuck in traffic, saying they'd tried to make it, saying they were so sorry, except they hadn't been stuck in traffic. They'd been meeting with their own lawyer, I found out later, had been trying to get advance on inheritance. Had been so certain oldest daughter tradition would work in their favor that they'd already started spending money they didn't have. And watching Derek now, watching him work room, watching him position himself, I understand why Dad planned whatever he planned, why he said it would be perfect, because Derek isn't just greedy, he's predictable, has followed script Dad apparently wrote for him, has done exactly what Dad anticipated, and anticipating it, planning for it. That was Dad's final gift. Not just to me, but to everyone in this room, to everyone who's watching Derek make fool of himself, to everyone who's about to witness what happens when you mistake silence for agreement, when you assume that being family gives you right to everything, when you confuse inheritance with entitlement. And Mr. Harrison finally stands, finally moves, and room goes quiet again, goes still, and he walks to front where Derek had stood on chair. Except Mr. Harrison doesn't need chair, doesn't need elevation, doesn't need performance. He just stands there with folder, with presence, with authority that comes from knowing truth, from holding power, from being person who actually knows what's written, what's legal, what's binding. And he says, his voice calm and clear and cutting through tension like knife through butter, "Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate everyone's." He pauses, looks directly at Derek. "Patience, but I think it's time we read the will. Time we hear exactly what Robert wanted, what he intended, what he spent considerable time ensuring was absolutely clear. And Derek's face to something interesting goes from confident to uncertain in span of seconds, and Emily reaches for his hand, and they're standing there together, united in their assumption, in their certainty, in their belief that oldest daughter means everything, except Mr. Harrison's expression, that tiny twitch at corner of his mouth. It's growing, it's becoming something more, and I realize with sudden clarity that whatever's in that folder, whatever Dad wrote, it's not what Derek thinks, it's not what Derek expects, it's something else. Entirely. And that something else, that revelation, that truth, it's about to destroy every assumption Derek made, every calculation he performed, every plan he built on foundation of tradition that Dad apparently never believed in, never agreed to, never intended to honor. And I'm absolutely ready to hear what Dad actually wrote, what he actually intended, what he's about to say from beyond grave. Because Dad always had last word, always finished conversations on his terms, and this conversation, this final statement, it's about to be spectacular. Mr. Harrison opens the folder, but doesn't look at it yet, doesn't read immediately. Instead, he looks around room, makes eye contact with various people, with my Aunt Patricia, who's clutching her purse like it's life preserver, with my cousin James, who's leaning forward in his chair, with Derek, who's trying to maintain confident expression, but there's something in his eyes now, something uncertain, something that suggests maybe, possibly, he's made miscalculation, and Mr. Harrison says before I read the will, before we get to legal language and distributions and all the technicalities that come with a state of this size, I want to tell you something about Robert, about the man you're here to honor, because understanding him, understanding his values, that's essential to understanding what he wrote. And Derek shifts his weight, crosses his arms, says in that slightly aggressive tone he uses when he's uncomfortable, trying to reclaim control, "We all knew Dad, we all loved him, can we just get to the actual will?" And Mr. Harrison doesn't even look at him, just continues speaking like Derek hasn't said anything, like Derek's interruption is less than insignificant, is actually proof of something, and he says, "Robert came to me 8 months ago, shortly after his diagnosis, and he said, 'Harrison, I need to make some changes, need to update things, need to make absolutely certain that what I've built goes to the right people.'" And I asked him what he meant by right people, because estate planning, it's usually straightforward. You leave things to your children, you split it evenly or according to need, you make provisions for grandchildren, it's template, it's standard. Except Robert said something I'd never heard before in 30 years of practice. He said the right people are the ones who showed up when it wasn't about money, who were there when there was nothing to gain except being there, who proved through actions, not words, that they understood what family actually means. And I remember thinking, that's beautiful sentiment, that's lovely philosophy, but how do you write that into legally binding document? How do you codify presence? How do you measure love in a way that holds up in court? And Robert smiled. You know that smile he had, that gentle knowing smile, and he said, "You'll see, you'll understand when the time comes. Just write exactly what I tell you and trust that it'll make sense." And I did. I wrote exactly what he dictated. And now, standing here, watching how this reception has unfolded, watching Derek's announcement, watching Emily's silence, watching Sarah's, he looks at me, watching her dignity, her restraint, her grief that hasn't been about money, hasn't been about inheritance, has been about losing father. I understand completely. I understand what Robert knew, what he planned for, what he anticipated, and I'm honored, truly honored, to read his words. And Derek says again, louder now, defensive, "Can we please just read it? We all know what it says. Oldest daughter gets primary inheritance." That's been family tradition for generations, and Mr. Harrison finally looks at him, really looks at him, and says, "Mr. Derek, I've been practicing estate law since before you were born. I've read thousands of wills. I've seen every kind of family dynamic, every kind of greed, every kind of love. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that what you think you know about this will, about Robert's intentions, about tradition, you're wrong. You're completely, fundamentally, spectacularly wrong." And room erupts not in sound but in energy, in sudden collective attention, in everyone leaning forward, in Derek's face going pale, in Emily's hand reaching for chair to steady herself, and Mr. Harrison opens folder, takes out single sheet of paper, and he reads, his voice clear and steady and without emotion, just facts, just truth, just Dad's words. "To my daughters, Sarah and Emily, I love you both. You've been my world since the day each of you came into my life. Sarah when you were born, Emily, when we brought you home at 6 months old, red-faced and screaming and absolutely perfect, and I've never, not once, not for a single moment, loved one of you more than the other. And Derek nods, like this confirms what he said, like this validates his announcement. Except Mr. Harrison isn't finished, continues reading, but love doesn't mean blind trust. And being family doesn't mean ignoring reality, doesn't mean pretending I don't see what I see, and what I've seen over the last 2 years since my diagnosis, since my time became measured in months instead of years, has been illuminating, has been educational, has shown me exactly who people are when they think there's something to gain. And Derek's face changes, goes from confident to confused to beginning of understanding, and Mr. Harrison reads, Emily, you were adopted into this family with open arms, with joy, with celebration, and I never once thought of you as adopted. Daughter, as different daughter, as lesser daughter. You were just my daughter, period. Same as Sarah, same love, same pride, same everything until the last 2 years, until the visits became audits, until the questions about my health started being followed by questions about my accounts, until I heard you on phone with Derek saying we need to make sure we're positioned right. We need to make sure the oldest daughter tradition is clear. We need to make sure we get what's fair, and that word, fair, it stuck with me because what is fair? Is it fair that Sarah brought soup? That she sat with me during chemo, that she read to me when I was too tired to hold book, that she never once asked about money, about inheritance, about what she'd get when I died? Or is it fair that you, Emily, showed up for hour here, 2 hours there, always with Derek asking questions, looking through papers, talking about estate planning, about market timing, about tradition that I never established, never believed in, never agreed to, and room is silent, is absolutely silent. You could hear pin drop, could hear people breathing, could hear Derek's sharp intake of breath, could hear Emily's small sound, not quite sob, not quite gasp, just small sound of something breaking, and Mr. Harrison continues. So here's my decision, and I've thought about this carefully, have consulted with Mr. Harrison extensively, have made absolutely certain this is legal, is binding, is unbreakable. The entirety of my liquid assets, approximately $10 million in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and cash accounts, goes to my biological daughter Sarah and her husband Marcus. Not because they're blood, not because of tradition, not because of birth order, but because they never asked, because they showed up, because they proved through consistent actions over 2 years of my dying that they understood family isn't about money, isn't about inheritance, isn't about getting, it's about being present, it's about love that doesn't calculate, that doesn't position, that doesn't plan for payout. And Derek makes sound now, says this is insane, she's adopted, there's legal precedent, there's tradition, oldest daughter, you can't just, and Mr. Harrison holds up one hand, says Mr. Derek, I'm not finished, and Derek closes his mouth but his face is red, is furious, is transitioning from confident to desperate, and Mr. Harrison reads, and before Derek tries to challenge this, before he calls lawyers, before he attempts to argue that this violates some tradition that exists only in his imagination, let me be clear, I consulted with 3 separate estate attorneys, I researched extensively, I made absolutely certain this will is unbreakable, and it's ironclad, it's legally sound, it's exactly what I want. And Derek, son, because you married my daughter, so technically your family, I have something specifically for you. And Mr. Harrison reaches into folder, pulls out USB drive, small thing, black, ordinary, and he says, Robert asked me to play this, asked me to make sure everyone, especially Derek, sees it, and he walks to laptop that someone had set up earlier for photo slideshow of Dad's life. The slideshow we'd been planning to show before Derek hijack reception, and he plugs in drive, clicks play, and screen lights up with Dad's face. Dad looking thin, looking tired, but looking alert, looking amused, looking like man who knows exactly what he's doing. And Dad looks directly into camera, says, hey family, if you're watching this, I'm gone, I'm dead, and you're at my funeral or reception or wherever Harrison chose to play this. And if Derek's standing there looking smug, looking confident, looking like he's won something, well, this part is specifically for you, son. And Dad leans closer to camera, and his eyes, those blue eyes that could see through any lie, any pretense, any performance, they're twinkling, and he says, Derek, you want tradition, you want oldest daughter inheritance, you want to cite precedent. So let me give you some precedent, some tradition, some family history. When my father died, he split everything evenly between his 3 children. When my grandfather died, he left everything to my grandmother. When my great-grandfather died, he left half to charity. So this oldest daughter tradition you keep citing, this rule you're so certain about, it doesn't exist, never existed, is something you made up, or convinced yourself of, and more importantly, even if it did exist, even if there was some ancient family rule about birth order. I'm the one who made the money. I'm the one who built the wealth. I'm the one who gets to decide where it goes, and I've decided, and my decision is final, is legal, is what's happening whether you like it or not. And screen goes dark for a moment, then comes back, and Dad's expression has changed, is softer now, and he says, Emily, sweetheart, if you're watching this, I'm sorry that I'm not giving you the money, but I'm not sorry about the decision itself, because what I saw over the last 2 years, the way you changed, the way you let Derek change you, the way you went from being my daughter to being part of his plan, that broke my heart, broke it in a way that cancer couldn't, because cancer was body failing, but watching you fail to be person I raised, watching you choose money over love, over presence, over just being with your dying father. That was choice, that was decision you made, and decisions have consequences, and this is consequence. And Dad pauses, wipes his eye, and says, but here's what I want you to know, what I need you to understand. You're still my daughter. I still love you. And there's provision in the will, smaller provision, enough for down payment on house, enough to start over if you choose to, but the bulk of estate, the millions that Derek was so certain about, that goes to Sarah and Marcus. And I really hope, that someday you'll understand why. That someday you'll realize what you lost wasn't money but perspective, wasn't inheritance but integrity, and that maybe, possibly, you'll find your way back to being person you were before Derek convinced you that being oldest meant being owed, and video ends and room is silent, completely silent, and then something happens that nobody expects, somebody in back. I think it's my cousin James, he laughs, just once, short bark of laughter, and then somebody else joins in, and then another. And then suddenly whole room except Derek and Emily is laughing, not mean laughter, not mocking exactly, more like release, like recognition, like appreciation for sheer audacity of man who planned his own posthumous reveal, who knew exactly what would happen, who wrote script that we're all living out. And Sarah, my name is Sarah by the way, I haven't been narrator. I've been character in story Dad wrote. I start laughing too, can't help it. Start laughing and crying simultaneously, and Marcus wraps his arms around me, and we're shaking with it, with relief, with grief, with absolute perfect justice of it all. And Derek's face is ashen, is gray, is color of man who just realized he's been outplayed by dead man. And Emily is crying, really crying now, and she looks at me finally makes eye contact, and her expression is complicated, is shame and grief and realization all mixed together, and I want to go to her, want to hug her. Want to be sisters again, but Derek grabs her arm, starts pulling her toward door, says we're leaving, this is fraud, this is, and Mr. Harrison says calmly, Mr. Derek, if you leave now, if you contest this will, Emily forfeits even the smaller provision Robert left her. Those are the terms, so I'd suggest you think carefully about next move. And Derek freezes, and Emily pulls her arm free. And Derek storms out alone, and Emily stands there crying, and room is watching, is waiting. And this is moment, this is choice. This is where Emily decides who she is, who she wants to be, whether she follows husband or stays with family. And she looks at door where Derek disappeared, then looks at me, and she takes step forward, then another, and I meet her halfway, and we're hugging. And she's saying, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I don't know what happened, I don't know who I became, and I'm holding her, holding my sister. And Dad was right, Dad was always right, because this moment of Emily choosing, of her staying, of her recognizing what she almost lost, this is what Dad wanted. This is what Dad planned for, and justice isn't just about money, isn't just about who gets what, it's about revelation, about truth, about people showing who they really are and facing consequences, and Derek showed exactly who he was, and Emily almost did too, but maybe, possibly, she's finding her way back. Emily and I are holding each other in middle of community center surrounded by everyone who knew Dad, everyone who loved him, everyone who just witnessed most spectacular posthumous revenge in family history, and Emily is shaking, her whole body trembling with sobs that sound like they're coming from somewhere deep, somewhere she's been keeping locked for 2 years, and she's saying, I didn't see it, I didn't see what was happening. I thought Derek was being practical, thought he was protecting us, protecting our future, and I should have known, should have seen that every visit became interrogation. Every conversation became calculation, but I loved him, love him, and I thought love meant supporting him, meant being team, meant letting him handle the financial stuff because he's good at that, he's smart about money. Except he wasn't being smart, was being greedy, was being exactly what Dad saw, what Dad tried to tell me. And I didn't listen, didn't want to hear it, and now Dad's gone. And I can't apologize, can't tell him I understand, can't make it right, and I'm holding her, my sister who I've known since she was 6 months old, who I taught to ride bike, who I defended from bullies, who I stood beside at her wedding to man who just stormed out, and I say you're here now, you stayed, you chose, and that matters. That's what Dad wanted, not the money, not the inheritance, but this moment, this choice. This recognition that family is more than transaction, and she pulls back. Looks at me with eyes that are red and swollen, and she says, the money, you should have it. Dad was right, you earned it, you were there, I wasn't. And I say Dad didn't want us fighting, didn't want money to destroy us, wanted us to understand something bigger. And she nods, wipes her face, says, I need to go home, need to talk to Derek, need to figure out what happens next. And I understand that her marriage, her life, everything she built with Derek is now online, is now question mark, because Derek just revealed himself, showed exactly what he valued, and Emily can't unsee that, can't unhear Dad's words, can't pretend she doesn't know what Derek is, and she hugs me once more, whispers thank you for not giving up on me, and leaves, not through door Derek stormed through, but through side exit, alone. And I watch her go and hope, really hope, that she finds her way to whatever comes next. And Marcus says quietly in my ear, that was intense, and I almost laugh because intense doesn't begin to cover what just happened, what Dad orchestrated, what we all just witnessed. And Mr. Harrison approaches us, folder still in hand, and he says, Sarah, Marcus, there are some papers to sign, some formalities to complete, but nothing urgent, nothing that can't wait until after you've had time to process, to grieve, to be human beings instead of beneficiaries. And I'm grateful for that, grateful for his understanding, grateful that Dad chose him, trusted him, gave him role in this final act. And Mr. Harrison continues, says, your father was a remarkable man. I've handled hundreds of estates, thousands of wills, but I've never seen anyone plan their own posthumous reveal with such precision, such understanding of human nature, such perfect timing. He actually predicted that Derek would make announcement at reception, told me to let it happen, to give him enough rope. Those were his exact words, give Derek enough rope and he'll hang himself. And he was right, he was absolutely right. And I asked, did Dad know Emily would stay, would choose us over Derek? And Mr. Harrison smiles, says he hoped, he believed she would, said deep down she's a good person who got lost, who let someone else's voice become louder than her own conscience. But he thought shock of revelation, the clarity of his words, the evidence of Derek's true nature. He thought that might wake her up, and looks like he was right about that too. And I think about Dad lying in hospice bed knowing he was dying, knowing he had limited time, and instead of being bitter, instead of raging against unfairness of terminal diagnosis, he spent energy planning this, documenting this, ensuring that even after death, he could protect his daughters, could teach lessons, could deliver justice. And that planning, that care, that attention to who we are and who we could become, that was love, real love, complicated love, love that doesn't just give, that challenges, that requires growth, that refuses to enable. And I understand now what Mr. Harrison meant about codifying presence, about measuring love, because Dad didn't measure it in hours or visits or soup deliveries. He measured it in intention, in authenticity, in whether we showed up because we wanted to or because we wanted something. And that measurement, that distinction, it was everything. I need to ask you something really important, and I want you to think about this carefully. Type greed if you've ever watched someone you love change because of money. Type family if you've had to choose between relatives who valued you and relatives who valued what you had, because what happened at that funeral, what Derek did, that wasn't isolated incident, wasn't unique situation, that's pattern. That's story that plays out in families everywhere, where inheritance becomes more important than relationship, where money transforms people, where greed wears mask of tradition, of fairness, of just making sure we get what's owed. And I need you to see this, need you to understand this, because maybe you're a living version of this. Maybe you're Emily choosing between spouse and family. Maybe you're me watching someone you love betray you. Maybe you're Derek realizing too late that you've overplayed your hand. And from our stats, we've got way more viewers than subscribers. If you're following the story, if you need to see how this ends, if you're dealing with family that values inheritance over integrity, kindly join our community and subscribe, because what happens next, what Derek does when reality sets in, what Emily chooses when she gets home, what Marcus and I discover about the full extent of Dad's planning, that's coming, and you need to see it. Need to understand that consequences don't end with dramatic revelation. They continue, they build, they transform. everyone involved, and watching them transform, understanding why Dad planned what he planned, seeing full architecture of his final gift. That's worth staying for. That's worth witnessing. That's worth understanding because it might, possibly, give you tools to handle your own family drama, your own inheritance battles, your own moments when you have to choose between money and meaning. Marcus and I drive home in silence. Not uncomfortable silence, but processing silence. The kind that comes after emotional earthquake, after everything you thought you knew gets rearranged, and we pull into driveway of house we've lived in for 5 years, small 3-bedroom that we'd been saving to upgrade, that we'd been planning to move from eventually, and Marcus says so we're millionaires now, says it like he's testing words, like he can't quite believe them, and I say we're trustees of Dad's legacy. That's different. That's bigger. That comes with responsibility, with obligation to use it right, to honor what Dad intended, and Marcus nods, says he was brilliant, you know that, right? He orchestrated that entire reveal, predicted everything, played Derek like violin, and I laugh, say Dad played chess, always thinking 3 moves ahead, always anticipating responses, always planning for contingencies, and Derek plays checkers, just focused on next jump, next capture, next immediate gain, and when checkers player goes against chess master wins, always wins, and we sit in car, not getting out yet, just sitting, and Marcus says, what do you want to do with it, with the money? And I say, honestly, I don't know, I haven't thought about it, have been so focused on Dad dying, on being present, on being daughter, that I didn't let myself think about what comes next, about how life changes when you suddenly have $10 million, and Marcus reaches over, takes my hand, says, we don't have to decide today, don't have to decide this month, can take time, can breathe, can grieve, can figure out what being stewards of this legacy actually means, and I love him, love Marcus, love that he doesn't see this as windfall, as lottery winning, as opportunity to quit job and buy things. He sees it as responsibility, as trust, as something that requires wisdom, and that's seeing that understanding. That's probably why Dad included him in Will. Why it says Sarah and Marcus, not just Sarah, because Dad saw what I see, saw that Marcus's partner is equal, is person who makes me better, who makes decisions better, who brings perspective I don't have, and together we'll figure out what to do with Dad's legacy, how to honor it, how to use it not just for ourselves but for good, for helping others, for creating something that Dad would be proud of, and that creating, that building, that's next chapter, that's what comes. After revelation, after justice, after dramatic funeral reception, what comes is living, is choosing, is becoming people worthy of trust Dad placed in us. And that becoming, that transformation from recipients to stewards, that's real inheritance. That's what Dad was actually giving us. Not money, but opportunity, chance to prove we understood, chance to demonstrate that we're people who can be trusted with resources, with power, with capacity to do real good. And I'm ready, I'm absolutely ready to be that person, to become that steward, to honor Dad by living life he would approve of. And Marcus says quietly, you know Derek's going to challenge this, going to hire lawyers, going to fight. And I say let him. Mr. Harrison said Will is ironclad. Dad made sure of it, spent months making sure every word, every clause, every provision was legally unbreakable. And even if Derek wants to fight, Emily won't. Emily stayed. Emily chose. And without Emily's cooperation, without her claiming she was wronged, Derek has no standing, has no case, has nothing except his own greed and dead man's perfect planning standing against him. And that standing, that opposition, it's unmovable, it's permanent. It's exactly what Derek deserves. And we finally get out of car, walk into house that suddenly feels different, feels like place where people with resources live, except nothing's changed. Furniture is same, walls are same, life is same. Only thing that's different is knowledge, is understanding that we have options now, have security, have capacity to make choices we couldn't make before, and that capacity, that freedom, it's gift, but it's also test of character, test of values, test of whether we'll become Derek, we'll become people who let money change us, or whether we'll become what Dad hoped, people who use resources to do good, to help others, to make worlds slightly better than we found it. And that test, that challenge, it's lifelong, it's ongoing, it's what we'll face every day for rest of our lives. And I think Dad knew that giving us money was giving us challenge, was asking us to prove we were different, we're better, we're people who understood that having resources means having responsibility, and I'm determined, absolutely determined, to pass that test, to be worthy of Dad's faith, to demonstrate that his planning, his trust, his belief in us, it was justified, was correct, was based on accurate assessment, of who we are and who we can become, and becoming, that beautiful, challenging, ongoing becoming. That's what inheritance actually means. Not receiving money, but becoming person worthy of receiving it. And Dad, brilliant Dad, he knew that, planned for that, created situation where we'd have to choose, have to decide, have to demonstrate through actions who we actually are, and I'm grateful, so grateful, that he trusted us with this, that he believed we'd make right choices, that he saw in us something worth investing in, worth protecting, worth leaving legacy to, and that's seeing, that recognition, that validation it's worth. More than money, more than stocks, more than anything except Dad himself, and losing him, that hole, that absence that's permanent, that doesn't get filled by inheritance, by justice, by watching Derek get what he deserved, but knowing that Dad saw me, understood me, trusted me, loved me enough to plan all this, that helps, that matters, that means everything, and I'm crying again. Not sad crying exactly, more like release, like letting go of tension I'd been holding since Derek's announcement. Since funeral, since Dad's diagnosis, since moment 2 years ago when I understood he was dying and nothing I did could stop it, and Marcus holds me, just holds me, doesn't try to fix it, doesn't try to make it better, just provides presence, provides stability, provides exactly what I need, which is someone who's there, who's staying, who's not going anywhere, and that presence, that commitment, that's family, real family, chosen family, family that doesn't depend on blood or tradition or inheritance, but on showing up, on being present, on proving through consistent action that you're here, you're staying, you're committed, and Dad understood that, built entire will around that principle, around idea that family is verb not noun, is action not status, is what you do not who you are, and what Marcus does, what he's always done is show up, is be present, is love me without agenda, without calculation, without planning for what he'll get, and that loving, that pure, uncomplicated loving, that's what made Dad include him in will. That's what made Dad trust him with legacy. That's what made Dad understand that Sarah and Marcus aren't just married couple, we're team, we're partnership, we're people who make each other better. And that better, that mutual elevation, that's what Dad wanted for both his daughters. Wanted us with partners who made us better. Except Emily got Derek, got man who made her worse, who encouraged worst impulses, who valued her for what she could provide rather than who she was, and that getting, that choice, that's what led to this moment, to this reckoning, to this point where Emily has to decide if she's staying with man who used her, who saw her as oldest daughter rather than person, who calculated her worth in inheritance rather than intrinsic value, and that decision, that choice Emily's facing right now probably at home with Derek, that's hardest thing. Harder than losing inheritance, harder than Dad dying, harder than anything. Except maybe looking in mirror and seeing person you've become and not recognizing them. And I hope, really deeply hope, that Emily looks in that mirror and sees someone worth saving, worth fighting for, worth choosing over man who just showed his true colors, and that choosing, that reclaiming of self, that would be real inheritance, real legacy, real gift Dad could give her, not money, but clarity, but truth, but understanding of who she is when she's not being who someone else wants her to be, and maybe, possibly, Dad's dramatic reveal will give her that, will shock her into seeing clearly, will provide catalyst for change she needs, and if it does, if Emily emerges from this stronger, better, more herself, then Dad's planning will have accomplished something money can't buy, something inheritance can't provide, something that makes all of this, all the drama, all the pain, all the revelation worth it. 3 days after the funeral, after the reception, after Dad's posthumous reveal that destroyed Derek's confidence and exposed everything, I get phone call from Emily at 7 in morning, and her voice is different, is smaller somehow, is voice of person who's been crying for days, who hasn't slept, who's been having conversations that break things permanently, and she says, "Can I come over? Can we talk? Just us. No Marcus. No Derek. Just sisters." And I say, "Of course, come now, come whenever." And she's at my door 20 minutes later, which means she was already in car when she called, was already driving, was calling to give me warning not to ask permission, and she looks terrible, looks like person who's been through war, hair pulled back in messy ponytail, no makeup, wearing sweatpants and hoodie that's definitely Derek's based on size, and she comes in, sits on couch, and just starts talking, says Derek wants to contest the will, has already called 3 lawyers, has meetings scheduled, has convinced himself that there's loophole, some technicality, some way to argue that Dad wasn't competent, that Mr. Harrison influenced him. That oldest daughter tradition is real and enforceable, and I listen, don't interrupt, because Emily needs to say this, needs to speak it out loud, needs to hear herself describe Derek's response, and she continues, says he's obsessed, won't talk about anything else, won't acknowledge that maybe he was wrong, that maybe his announcement was inappropriate, that maybe Dad had good reasons for his decision. Derek just keeps saying it's not fair, we deserve it, Emily's the oldest, tradition matters, and it's like he's stuck, like he can't move past this, can't accept reality, can't adjust to a world where he doesn't get what he wanted. And I ask quietly, what do you want? Not what Derek wants, what Emily wants, and she looks at me and her face crumbles. And she says, I want Dad back, I want to undo last 2 years, I want to be person I was before I let Derek convince me that being family meant being owed, and I can't have that, can't go back, can only go forward, and going forward means deciding if I'm staying with man who cares more about money than about me, who spent last 3 days raging about inheritance, rather than grieving man who was his father-in-law, who treated him like son, who welcomed him into family, and that man, that Derek. I don't know if I love him anymore, don't know if I ever loved him, or if I loved who I thought he was, and discovering you don't know person you married, she pauses, that's terrifying, and I move to couch beside her, put my arm around her, and she leans into me the way she used to when we were kids, when she'd had bad dream, when she'd been bullied at school, when she'd needed sister, and I say you can stay here, can leave him, can figure out what comes next without him pressuring you, without him calculating your worth, and she says he'll fight the divorce, will make it ugly, we'll try to get something from separation, even though we have prenup, even though he came into marriage with nothing, he'll find way to make it cost me, and I say let him try, you have lawyers now, you have Mr. Harrison who Dad trusted, you have resources from the provision Dad left you, and more importantly, you have me, have Marcus, have family that isn't conditional, that doesn't depend on your net worth. And she cries harder, says I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for everything, for Derek's announcement, for the last 2 years, for not being there when Dad was dying, for choosing wrong, for being person who needed Dad to die and leave dramatic video to wake up, and I say you're awake now, that's what matters, you're seeing clearly, you're making choice to be different, to be better, and that choosing, that's brave, that's hard, that's what Dad hoped for, and she says did Dad know? Did he predict that Derek would push me to contest, that our marriage would implode, that I'd end up here on your couch at 7 in the morning having existential crisis, and I say probably, Dad was 3 steps ahead of everyone, always. He knew Derek, saw him clearly, understood exactly what Derek would do when money didn't go his way, and he planned for it, left you provisions specifically so you'd have resources to leave, to start over, to be independent, and that provision, that smaller inheritance, it wasn't punishment, was exit strategy, was Dad giving you tools to escape if you chose to, and choosing to, that's what he was hoping for, was counting on, was betting on, and she sits up, wipes face, says I need to get my things, need to leave before Derek gets home from lawyer meeting, need to pack essentials and go. Can I stay here for a few days, just until I figure out next steps? And I say you can stay as long as you need. We have spare room. Marcus won't mind. We're family. This is what family does. And she hugs me, hard, desperate hug of person who's drowning and just found lifeline. And she says I'll go now. While he's gone, I'll pack. I'll leave note. I'll be back in hour, and she leaves, drives away, and I text Marcus at work, tell him Emily's leaving, Derek will be staying with us, and he responds immediately with good. She deserves better. I'll pick up dinner for 3, and that response, that immediate acceptance, that unquestioning support, that's why Dad trusted Marcus, why Dad included him in will, why Dad saw him as family rather than just son-in-law. Because Marcus doesn't calculate, doesn't measure, doesn't weigh cost versus benefit, he just does. Right thing, supports right choice, shows up when needed, and that showing up, that consistent presence, that's everything. That's what separates people like Marcus from people like Derek and Emily. She's about to learn that difference, about to experience what it means to be loved without agenda, without calculation, without someone always measuring what you're worth versus what you cost. And that learning, that experience, that might be more valuable than any inheritance, might be real gift. Dad was trying to give her not money but clarity, not provision but perspective, not resources but recognition of what matters, and what matters isn't tradition, isn't birth order, isn't who gets what when parent dies. What matters is who shows up, who stays, who loves without keeping score, and Derek kept score, kept detailed accounting of every visit, every question, every positioning for advantage, and that accounting, that scorekeeping, that destroyed him, made him unable to see that relationship with Emily was more valuable than inheritance, that having father-in-law who trusted him was worth more than $10 million, that being family meant something beyond financial benefit, and missing that, failing to understand that, that was Derek's tragedy, his loss, his self-inflicted wound, and Emily, she almost missed it too, almost let Derek's accounting become her accounting, almost lost herself in his calculations, but Dad's video, Dad's words, Dad's clear-eyed assessment of what had happened, that woke her up, that shocked her into seeing, and seeing, really seeing, that's first step to changing, to becoming different, to reclaiming self you lost, and Emily's taking that step, is choosing to leave, is deciding that being alone is better than being with someone who values you for what you have rather than who you are, and that decision, that brave, terrifying, necessary decision, that's growth, that's healing, that's exactly what Dad wanted for her, and I'm so proud of her, so relieved for her, so hopeful that she'll emerge from this stronger, better, more herself than she's been in years. Emily returns exactly 1 hour later with 2 suitcases and box of personal items, and her face is set, is determined, is expression of person who's made decision and is following through regardless of cost. And she says he called while I was packing, said if I leave he's contesting will, said he'll make sure I lose everything Dad left me, said I'm betraying him, betraying our marriage, choosing money over love, and the irony, the absolute perfect irony of Derek accusing me of choosing money over love when that's exactly what he's been doing. And I told him I'm choosing self-respect over manipulation. I'm choosing clarity over confusion. I'm choosing sister who actually loves me over husband who loves what I represent. And I hung up, blocked his number, left notes saying my lawyer will contact his lawyer, and I left and sang it out loud, describing it. It sounds so simple, so clean, so easy, except my hands are shaking. My heart is racing. I feel like I'm going to throw up. Because ending marriage, leaving person you shared life with, that's not simple, is complicated, is messy, is everything difficult all at once, but it's also right, is necessary, is only path forward that doesn't require me to keep being someone I don't want to be, and I help her carry suitcases to spare room, help her unpack essentials, and she sits on bed in room that's now temporarily hers, and she says, tell me about Dad, about the last weeks, about what he said, what he was like, about everything I missed, and I sit beside her and I tell her about Dad's humor even when he was dying, about how he'd make jokes about morphine, about how he'd asked Marcus to promise to make sure I didn't become hermit after he died, about how he'd made me promise to use inheritance wisely, to help others, to remember that money is tool not destination, and I tell her about last conversation I had with him, 2 days before he died, when he was barely conscious but he'd grabbed my hand and said, Sarah, you're going to be okay. You're strong, you're good, and Emily, she's going to find her way back. I believe that, I have to believe that. And then he'd closed his eyes and I thought that was it. Thought those were last words, but he'd opened them one more time and said, and Derek's going to regret everything. And that wasn't vindictive, wasn't angry, was just observation, just fact. Just Dad seeing future clearly the way he always had. And Emily cries hearing this, cries. For conversations she didn't have, for moments she missed. For time she wasted positioning for inheritance rather than being present for dying father, and I hold her, let her cry, don't try to make it better because it can't be better, can only be learned from, can only be transformed into motivation to do differently, to be differently, to choose differently going forward, and that transformation, that commitment to growth, that's how she honors Dad now. That's how she makes amends for absence. That's how she demonstrates that his faith in her, his belief that she'd find her way back, wasn't misplaced and she will find her way back, is already finding it, is here, is crying, is feeling, is being human rather than playing role Derek assigned her, and that being, that authentic, messy, complicated being, that's what Dad wanted. That's what he fought for with his dramatic reveal. That's what he was protecting with his careful planning, and it worked. His plan worked, his faith was justified, his belief was confirmed because Emily's here, is staying, is choosing family over money, is choosing self over spouse, is choosing growth over comfort, and those choices, those brave, difficult, necessary choices, they're changing her, are transforming her, are making her into person she was always supposed to be, person she was before Derek, person Dad remembered, person who's coming back. And that coming back, that return to self, that's miracle. That's gift. That's inheritance more valuable than money, more lasting than stocks, more important than anything Dad could have left in will, because it's her, is Emily, is my sister, and having her back, really back, not Derek's wife but Emily, that's worth everything, is worth drama, is worth revelation, is worth all of it. Marcus comes home with Chinese food for three, and we sit at kitchen table, the three of us, and it feels right, feels like family, feels like what dinner table is supposed to be, people who care about each other sharing meal, sharing space, sharing life without agenda, without calculation, without anyone keeping score. And Marcus asks Emily about her plans, about what comes next, and she says honestly she doesn't know. Says she needs to find divorce lawyer, needs to figure out living situation. Needs to start therapy probably, needs to process last 2 years, last 2 weeks, last 2 days, needs to understand how she let herself become person who almost lost everything that mattered. And Marcus says you're already doing it, you're already processing, already understanding, already growing, and growth isn't comfortable, isn't easy, isn't something that happens without pain, but you're doing it anyway. And that's courage, that's strength, that's exactly what you need. And Emily looks at him with something like wonder, like she's never heard man speak to her without wanting something, without calculating angle, without measuring her response against his benefit. And she says, thank you, both of you, for not giving up on me, for letting me come back, for being family when I didn't deserve it. And I say family isn't about deserving, isn't about earning, isn't transactional, is just about showing up, about being present, about choosing each other even when it's hard. And you're here, you showed up, you chose, and that's all that matters. That's all that's ever mattered. And we eat and we talk and we plan. And for first time in 2 years, maybe longer, Emily laughs, really laughs at something Marcus says. And that laugh, that genuine sound of joy, of relief, of person starting to find themselves again. That's music. That's victory. That's proof that Dad's plan worked, that justice was served, that love won. And winning, real winning, doesn't look like money, doesn't look like inheritance, looks like this, looks like 3 people at kitchen table sharing meal and building future and choosing each other. And that choosing, that commitment, that family, that's everything Dad wanted, everything he planned for, everything his dramatic funeral reveal was designed to create. And we're here, we're doing it, we're living the life he envisioned. And somewhere, somehow, I think Dad's watching, is smiling that gentle smile, is satisfied that his work is done, that his daughters found their way back to each other. That family survived what money tried to destroy, and survival, real survival, that's triumph, is victory, is exactly what he was counting on. 2 weeks after Emily moves in with us, after she's filed for divorce, after Derek's lawyer has sent threatening letters that Mr. Harrison dismisses with single phone call, after Emily's started therapy and begun unpacking 2 years of manipulation, we get another surprise, another piece of Dad's plan that none of us knew existed. And it comes in form of letter, actual physical letter, delivered by Mr. Harrison, who shows up at our door on Saturday morning with envelope that's sealed with wax. Old-fashioned seal with Dad's initials pressed into red wax. And Mr. Harrison says Robert left specific instructions. This letter is to be delivered exactly 2 weeks after the funeral, exactly when Emily had either chosen to stay with Derek or had chosen to leave. And he wanted you both to read it together. Wanted you to see what he wrote after the will was read, after Derek showed himself, after choices were made. And Emily and I sit on couch. Marcus makes himself scarce, goes to kitchen to give us privacy, and I break seal carefully, unfold paper that's thick, expensive, the kind Dad used for important correspondence, and his handwriting fills page, that distinctive script that's half print, half cursive, and I read out loud so Emily can hear, Dear Sarah, and Emily, if you're reading this together, if Emily is there with you, Sarah, then my plan worked, then the choices I hoped would be made were made, then the family I built is stronger than the money I accumulated, and that strength, that resilience, that's my real legacy, not the stocks, not the accounts, not the assets that Derek was so focused on, but you, my daughters, together, supporting each other, being family in a way that transcends transaction. And I pause because my voice is breaking and Emily takes my hand. And I continue, I want to tell you a story I've never told anyone, story about why I planned things the way I did, why I was so certain Derek would reveal himself, why I knew money would either destroy you or unite you. And the story is this. When I was a young man, when I was building company that would eventually make fortune, my own father died, and he left everything to my older brother, everything based on tradition, on oldest son inheritance rule that our family had supposedly followed for generations, and I got nothing, not because my father didn't love me, but because tradition mattered more than relationship, more than presence, more than fact that I'd been one caring for him. In final years, while my brother was busy building his own empire, and that nothing, that exclusion, it devastated me. Not because I needed money, I was already making my own fortune, but because it told me that my father valued tradition over me. valued birth order over relationship, valued what people would think over what was right. And I vowed standing at his funeral feeling angry and hurt and diminished, that I would never do that to my children, would never let tradition or expectation or what people thought should happen determine how I showed love, how I distributed what I built, how I made sure my daughters knew they were valued. And Emily is crying now, quiet tears running down face, and I keep reading. So when Derek started talking about oldest daughter tradition, when he started positioning Emily as primary heir based on birth order, when he started citing rules that didn't exist, invoking traditions I'd never established, I recognized it, recognized my brother's arguments, recognized my father's logic, recognized system that values position over person, and I knew with absolute certainty that I had to break it, had to demonstrate that family isn't about hierarchy, isn't about order, isn't about who came first, is about who shows up, who loves, who chooses to be present even when there's nothing to gain except being present. And Sarah, you did that, you showed up, you proved that love isn't calculation, and Emily, you almost didn't. Almost let Derek convince you that being oldest meant being owed, but I had faith, had belief that somewhere under Derek's influence was girl I raised, was daughter, who understood that family is verb not noun, and if you're reading this together, then that girl came back, then you remembered, then you chose right, and I'm proud, so proud, not because you inherited money, but because you inherited something more important. You inherited understanding, you inherited clarity, you inherited knowledge that people matter more than position, that presence matters more than protocol, that love, real love, it's shown through action, not claimed through birth order. And the letter continues. Now I want to tell you what to do with inheritance, not dictate, not demand, but suggest, because I trust your judgment, trust your hearts, trust that you'll make decisions I'd approve of. And my suggestion is this: use it to help people, use it to create opportunities, use it to demonstrate that money is tool, not destination, is resource, not identity, is something that should flow, should circulate, should benefit not just recipient, but everyone recipient touches. And specifically, I want you to consider starting foundation, something that helps families, that supports people leaving abusive relationships, that provides resources for those who need exit strategy, need fresh start, need someone to believe in them enough to give them tools to rebuild. Because Emily, I suspect by time you're reading this, you've left Derek, you've chosen yourself over marriage that was diminishing you, and that choosing, that was hard, was terrifying, was everything difficult, and you did it, and others need to be able to do it too, need resources, need support, need foundation that says you're valuable, you're worth saving, you deserve better, and that foundation, that would honor what you've learned, what you've survived, what you've become. And Sarah, you'll understand this too. Understand that privilege of resources means responsibility to help others, means obligation to use what you have to make world better, means taking pain, taking lessons, taking growth, and transforming it into something that helps others grow. And together, my daughters, together you could create something beautiful, something lasting, something that matters more than stock portfolio, more than bank account, more than any monetary inheritance. And I finish reading, and Emily and I are both crying. And she says he knew exactly what would happen, knew I'd leave Derek, knew we'd end up here, knew we'd need direction, need purpose, need way to transform pain into meaning. And I say Dad always knew, always saw 3 steps ahead, always understood that giving people money without giving them purpose was cruelty disguised as kindness. And this letter, this suggestion, this vision of foundation, its purpose, its direction, its way to honor him that isn't about mourning but about building. And Emily says I want to do it, want to start foundation, want to help people leaving marriages like mine, leaving situations where they've been manipulated, where they've lost themselves, where they need resources and support, and someone saying you can do this, you're strong enough, you're worth it. And I say we'll do it together, we'll build it together, we'll create something Dad would be proud of. And Marcus comes back from kitchen, has been listening probably, and he says, I'll help, I'll contribute time, expertise, whatever you need, because this is exactly right. This is how you honor someone, not through grief, not through dwelling on loss, but through creation, through building, through making sure their values, their beliefs, their love continues to impact world even after they're gone. And we spend rest of morning planning, talking about what foundation would look like, who it would serve, how we'd structure it, what we'd call it. And Emily suggests Robert's Legacy Foundation, and I suggest Second Chances Foundation, and we debate, discuss, explore options, and eventually settle on Rising Foundation, because that's what we're doing, what Dad enabled us to do, what his careful planning, his dramatic reveal, his perfect understanding of human nature made possible. We're rising, we're growing, we're becoming people who transform pain into purpose, loss into legacy, inheritance into impact. And that transformation, that alchemy, that's magic, that's meaning. That's everything Dad hoped we'd achieve. 3 months later, we file paperwork for Rising Foundation, and Emily is listed as co-founder, as director of family services, as person whose story, whose experience, whose survival makes her perfect advocate for others leaving difficult relationships, and I'm listed as co-founder, as director of operations, as person who will handle logistics, finances, structure, and Marcus is listed as board member, as advisor, as supporter, and Mr. Harrison agrees to serve on board, says Robert would have loved this, would have been so proud, would have seen this as validation of everything he believed about you, about what you'd do with resources, about how you'd honor his memory. And we rent office space, small space, just 2 rooms and reception area, and we hire first employee woman named Jennifer, who's survivor herself, who understands what it means to leave, to start over, to need support, and she becomes face of foundation, becomes person who answers phones, who talks to people reaching out, who says yes, we can help. Yes, you're worth it. Yes, there's path forward, and watching foundation come together, watching vision become reality, watching Dad's money transform into something that helps people, that's healing, that's purpose, that's meaning beyond anything I imagined inheritance could provide. And Emily is transformed, is person I remember from childhood, is sister who laughs, who has opinions, who doesn't check with anyone before speaking, who's reclaimed herself so completely that sometimes I forget she was ever different, was ever diminished, was ever Derek's wife rather than Emily, and her divorce finalizes on sunny afternoon in May, and Derek contests nothing in the end, takes nothing, leaves with nothing except his own bitterness and understanding that he destroyed something valuable, something irreplaceable, something that no amount of money could have been worth destroying. And Emily celebrates by buying herself ring, simple silver band, and she wears it on right hand. And when I ask what it means, she says it means I'm committed to myself now, means I'm choosing myself, means I'm never again going to let someone else's voice become louder than my own. And that commitment, that clarity, that self-love, that's inheritance too, is gift Dad gave her through painful process of revelation, through shocking exposure of Derek's true nature, through forcing choice that required courage, and making that choice, following through, becoming person who chooses herself. That's victory, that's triumph, that's everything Dad wanted for her, and she achieved it. She's living it. She's proof that sometimes the most loving thing parent can do is force crisis, is create moment of clarity, is refuse to enable, is demand that children grow, that they choose, that they become people worthy of trust being placed in them. And Dad did that, did it through careful planning, through understanding human nature, through believing that pain, properly directed, could become catalyst for growth. And he was right, was absolutely right. And watching Emily now, confident, clear, committed to herself and to helping others, I understand that the $10 million, the inheritance, the stocks and bonds and accounts, those were never point, were never destination, were just tools, were just resources that enabled real inheritance, which was growth, was healing, was transformation, was becoming people who understood that family is choice, that love is action, that money is tool, not master, and understanding that, living that, teaching that to others through foundation, through example, through story we're telling with our lives. That's how we honor Dad. That's how we prove his faith was justified. That's how we demonstrate that his dramatic funeral reveal, his careful planning, his perfect understanding of who we were and who we could become, all of it was worth it. All of it mattered. All of it created exactly what he hoped, which is daughters who know their worth, who choose each other, who use resources to help others, and that using, that giving, that circulation of blessing, that's what he wanted, that's what he planned for, that's what he's left us, and we're living it, we're honoring it. We're proving that sometimes the best inheritance isn't what you receive, but what you become in process of receiving it, and what we've become, strong, clear, purposeful, committed. That's Dad's real legacy. That's what actually matters. That's what lasts beyond money, beyond stocks, beyond anything that can be counted or calculated. And I'm grateful, so grateful, that he loved us enough to plan this, to force this, to create conditions for growth, even though growth is painful, even though revelation is shocking, Even though choice is hard, because hard things, painful things, shocking things, those are what transform us. Those are what make us better. Those are what turn children into adults, victims into survivors, recipients into stewards, and that transformation, that beautiful, difficult, necessary transformation, that's what Dad gave us. That's his gift. That's his love. And we're accepting it, we're honoring it, we're passing it forward. And that passing, that continuation, that's immortality, that's legacy, that's how love survives death, through people who carry it forward, who let it change them, who use it to change others, and we're changed, we're changing, we're agents of change, and that agency, that power, that capacity to impact world positively, that's everything, that's inheritance worth having, worth fighting for, worth choosing family over money to achieve, and we chose, we fought, we achieved, and Dad, brilliant Dad, he knew we would, he believed we could, he planned for exactly this, and his planning, his faith, his love, it worked, it all worked, and we're living proof, walking testimony, breathing evidence that sometimes the greatest gift parent can give isn't protection from pain, but tools to transform pain into purpose, and those tools, properly used, properly honored, properly shared, they change everything. 1 year after Dad's funeral, 1 year after Derek's announcement, 1 year after the video that changed everything, Emily and I stand in office of Rising Foundation, and we're preparing for our first annual gala, our first major fundraising event, our first public demonstration of what we've built from Dad's inheritance, from his vision, from his perfect understanding that money matters less than meaning. And the foundation has grown beyond anything we imagined. We've helped 43 families in first year, 43 people leaving difficult relationships, leaving situations where they'd been manipulated or diminished or made to believe they were worth less than they actually were. And we've provided emergency housing, legal assistance, therapy, job training, childcare, everything needed to make leaving possible, to make starting over achievable, to make rebuilding successful, and watching people transform, watching them reclaim themselves, watching them become who they were before someone told them who to be. That's been privilege, that's been honor, that's been proof that Dad's money, properly directed, properly used, properly shared, can change lives, can create ripples that extend far beyond original gift. And Emily is different now, is completely different, is woman I barely recognize, except I do recognize her from childhood, from before Derek, from when she was just Emily, my sister, person with opinions and dreams and voice that didn't need permission, and she's that person again, is more than that person, is person who's survived, who's grown, who's transformed pain into purpose, and she's brilliant at foundation work, is natural at talking to people, at understanding what they need, at providing not just resources but hope, but belief, but certainty that they can do this, they can leave, they can rebuild, and that providing, that gift of belief, it comes from experience, comes from her having done it, having survived it, having emerged stronger, and people see that in her, trust that in her, believe her when she says you can do this because she did it, and her doing it, her testimony, her living proof, that's more powerful than any amount of money, more convincing than any argument, more transformative than any intervention. And Dad knew that Emily's survival would become someone else's hope, knew that her transformation would inspire other transformations, knew that making her choose, forcing crisis, creating moment of clarity, that would eventually help not just her but dozens, hundreds, eventually thousands of others, and that knowing, that foresight, that multi-generational thinking, that's genius, that's love so profound it plans beyond individual, beyond family, beyond anything except impact, and impact, real impact, that's what we're creating, what we're building, what we're seeing evidence of every day in emails from people we've helped, in calls from people who need help, in applications from people who want to work with us, who want to be part of mission, who understand that this foundation, this work, this commitment to helping people leave situations that diminish them, it matters, it's necessary, it's exactly what world needs, and being part of that, building that, watching it grow, that's fulfillment beyond anything money could buy, beyond anything inheritance could provide, beyond anything except knowing that Dad's legacy is living, is growing, is touching lives he never met, and that touching, that extending of love beyond grave, that's immortality, that's meaning, that's everything. Marcus and I are standing in back of ballroom we've rented for gala, watching people arrive, donors and volunteers and families we've helped and community leaders and reporters and everyone who's interested in what we're building, and there are maybe 200 people here, maybe more, and Marcus says quietly he'd be proud, your dad, he'd see this and know it worked, know his plan wasn't just about money, was about creating momentum, creating movement, creating change that extends beyond family, and I nod because speaking would make me cry, and Emily is at podium now, is preparing to give opening remarks, and she looks confident, looks powerful, looks like woman who knows her worth, who's claimed her voice, who's become person she was always meant to be, and she begins speaking, says welcome to Rising Foundation's first annual gala, welcome to celebration of survival, of transformation, of understanding that leaving is possible, that rebuilding is achievable, that you are worth fighting for, and I watch faces in crowd, watch them lean forward, watch them listen, watch them respond to Emily's authenticity, her vulnerability, her willingness to share her story, and she does. Share it. Shares about being adopted, about feeling grateful, about letting gratitude become obligation, about meeting Derek, about marriage that slowly diminished her, about father who saw clearly, who planned carefully, who loved enough to force choice, and she says my father left me inheritance, but it wasn't what my ex-husband expected, wasn't what I expected, was smaller than my sister received, and for a brief, painful moment, I thought that meant he loved me less, valued me less, saw me as less than, but I was wrong, was completely wrong, because what he left me was exactly what I needed, was enough to leave, enough to start over, enough to discover that being loved isn't about getting most, is about being seen, being understood, being trusted to make right choices, even when those choices are hard. And my father, Robert, he saw me, understood me, trusted me, and because he did, because he loved me enough to let me experience consequences of my choices. I'm here, I'm free, I'm helping others become free, and that helping, that's inheritance worth having, worth fighting for, worth honoring. And she pauses, looks directly at me, says, and my sister Sarah, she got larger inheritance, got bulk of estate. And some people might think that's favoritism, might think that's preference, might think that's dad loving her more, but it's not. It's dad understanding that different people need different things, that Sarah needed resources to build foundation, needed tools to create change, needed capital to make vision reality, and I needed freedom, needed exit, needed enough to leave, but not so much that I'd be comfortable staying, and Dad knew that, gave us both exactly what we needed, and that giving, that perfect calibrated understanding of who we were and what would help us grow, that's love, real love, complicated love, love that doesn't just comfort but challenges, doesn't just give but demands, doesn't just accept but expects, and I'm grateful, so grateful that he loved me that way, loved me enough to let me struggle, to let me fail, to let me learn, because struggling, failing, learning, that's how we become who we're meant to be, and who I'm meant to be is standing here, is helping others, is proving that Dad's faith wasn't misplaced, and the room erupts in applause, and Emily's crying, and I'm crying, and Marcus is squeezing my hand, and I understand that this moment, this gala, this celebration, this isn't about money, isn't about how much we've raised, or how many people we've helped, or how successful Foundation has become. It's about Dad, about his vision, about his understanding that inheritance should transform, not just recipient, but everyone recipient touches. And we're transformed, we're transforming others, we're creating ripples that extend far beyond anything Dad could have anticipated, except he probably did anticipate it, probably saw exactly this, probably knew that giving us purpose along with resources would create something beautiful, something lasting, something that would honor him better than any memorial, any tribute, any traditional inheritance ever could. And that knowing, that faith, that trust, it's breathtaking, it's humbling, it's everything. The gala raises $400,000 and we use it to expand services, to hire more staff, to help more families, and Emily hires Jennifer, that first employee, to be associate director, and Jennifer hires 2 more people, and Foundation grows and impact grows and ripples extend further. And 6 months after gala, Emily meets man named Thomas who's volunteer, who comes every week to help with administrative work, who's quiet, who's kind, who asks Emily about her day, without calculating what her answer means for him. And I watch how Thomas listens, how he shows up, how he proves through consistent action that he sees Emily, not Emily's inheritance, not Emily's story, not Emily's potential usefulness, just Emily, and watching him do that, watching Emily respond, watching her trust again, carefully, slowly, properly, that's miracle, that's healing. That's proof that Dad's plan worked completely, worked beyond money, beyond foundation, beyond anything except Emily's capacity to love again, to trust again, to believe that not all men are Derek, that some men show up without agenda, that love, real love, exists and Thomas is proving it, is demonstrating it, is being exactly what Emily needs, which is present, which is consistent, which is someone who values her for who she is rather than what she has, and that valuing, that seeing, that authentic appreciation, that's what Dad wanted for her. That's what he was protecting when he made. Well, the way he made it, that's what he was creating space for. And space has been created, has been filled, has become relationship that honors Emily, that elevates her, that makes her better rather than smaller. And watching that, witnessing that, knowing that Dad's planning extended even to this, to Emily's capacity to find healthy love after leaving unhealthy marriage. That's profound. That's foresight beyond anything I can comprehend. Except Dad always saw further, always understood deeper, always planned better than anyone else, and his planning, his vision, his love, it's all coming together, it's all working, it's all proving that sometimes the most loving thing parent can do is refuse to enable, is force growth, is create conditions where children have to choose, have to decide, have to become people worthy of inheritance they're receiving, and we've become those people. We're worthy, we're honoring him, we're proving that his faith, his trust, his belief in us wasn't misplaced, wasn't optimistic fantasy, was accurate assessment of who we were and who we could become given right circumstances, right resources, right push, and that push, that dramatic funeral reveal, that shocking video, that perfect exposure of Derek's greed, that was catalyst, was spark, was beginning of everything good that's happened since. And I'm grateful, so grateful, that Dad loved us enough to plan it, to execute it, to trust that we'd understand eventually even if we didn't. Understand immediately, and we understand now. We understand completely. We understand that inheritance isn't about money, is about transformation, is about becoming people who use resources to help others, who transform pain into purpose, who prove that family is choice, that love is action, that meaning is created through impact. And we're creating that meaning, we're making that impact. We're proving that Dad's legacy isn't $10 million, is 2 daughters who understand what matters, who've built foundation that helps others, who've transformed inheritance into impact. And that transformation, that's everything. That's what actually matters. That's what lasts beyond money, beyond stocks, beyond anything that can be counted or calculated or contested. And Derek, wherever Derek is, whatever Derek's doing, he's missed all of this, has missed meaning, has missed purpose, has missed understanding that the real inheritance wasn't money, was opportunity to become better, and he chose money, chose fighting, chose bitterness, and that choosing, that's his loss, his tragedy, his self-inflicted wound. And I don't hate him, don't wish him ill, just feel sad that he couldn't see, couldn't understand, couldn't recognize that what he was fighting for wasn't worth having compared to what he was losing, and what he lost was Emily, was family, was connection to something larger than himself, and that losing, that's permanent, that's irreversible, that's exactly what Dad predicted, what Dad warned against, what Dad's entire plan was designed to prevent for us while allowing for Derek, and it worked, it all worked. And standing here 1 year later, watching Foundation thrive, watching Emily heal, watching Marcus support, watching community respond, watching impact ripple outward, I understand that Dad didn't just leave us money, left us mission, left us purpose, left us understanding that greatest inheritance is knowing what you're worth, knowing what matters, knowing that family is choice and love is action and money is tool, and knowing that, living that, teaching that, that's how we honor him, that's how we prove his planning was justified, that's how we demonstrate that dramatic funeral reveal, that shocking video, that perfect exposure of greed, that was necessary, was loving, was exactly right. And I'm grateful, so grateful, that he loved us enough to do it, to plan it, to trust that we'd understand, and we understand completely. And we're living proof that sometimes the best gift parent can give isn't protection from pain, but tools to transform pain into purpose. And those tools, properly used, create foundation, create impact, create legacy that extends beyond individual, beyond family, beyond anything except love properly directed, properly shared, properly multiplied, and that multiplication, that's Dad's real inheritance. That's what actually matters. That's what we're honoring every day through foundation, through choices, through becoming people worthy of trust he placed in us. And being worthy, that's everything, that's meaning. That's how you honor someone who saw you clearly, who loved you completely, who planned perfectly, who left legacy that's living, breathing, growing, touching lives, creating change, proving that sometimes the most dramatic moment at funeral isn't burial, is revelation, is truth, is perfect justice delivered by man who understood that love isn't about giving people what they want, is about giving them what they need to become who they're meant to be. And what we needed was crisis, was choice, was clarity, and Dad gave us all three. And we're grateful, we're transformed, we're proof that his plan worked, that his love was real, that his legacy is living. And if you've watched this entire story, if you've seen how funeral announcement became catalyst for transformation, how greed was exposed and love was proven and family was rebuilt, then you understand something important. You understand that inheritance isn't about money, is about meaning, is about transformation, is about becoming person worthy of resources you're receiving, and that becoming, that's journey, that's work. That's exactly what we've done, what we're still doing, what we'll continue doing for the rest of our lives. And if you're dealing with family that values money over meaning, with relatives who see inheritance as entitlement, with people who confuse tradition with obligation, then take this story, learn from it. Understand that sometimes the most loving thing is refusing to enable, is forcing choice, is creating clarity, and that clarity, properly delivered, properly timed, properly executed, can change everything, can transform everything, can create everything good that's come from Dad's dramatic reveal. And that good, that impact, that legacy, it's real, it's lasting, it's proof that love properly expressed creates ripples that extend far beyond anything we can imagine. And those ripples, they're still extending, still growing, still touching lives, and that's immortality, that's meaning, that's everything. And we're living it, we're honoring it. We're proving that Dad was right about everything, and being right, being that wise, being that loving, that's rare, that's precious. That's exactly what we're celebrating, what we're continuing, what we're passing forward. And that passing forward, that's how love survives death, through people who carry it, who share it, who multiply it. And we're multiplying it, we're proving it, we're living testimony that dramatic funeral reveal was actually perfect expression of love. And if you understand that, if you see that, if you recognize that sometimes shock is necessary, and crisis is loving, and forcing choice is gift, then you understand what Dad understood, what we've learned, what we're teaching through foundation, through example, through story we're telling with our lives. And that story, it's good story, it's true story, it's story worth sharing, worth learning from, worth using to transform your own family dynamics, your own inheritance battles, your own moments when you have to choose between money and meaning. And choosing meaning, that's always right. Choice is always path to fulfillment, is always way to honor people who loved you enough to give you tools to grow. And Dad gave us those tools, and we've grown, and growing, that's everything.